Well, Happy New Year, guys. Welcome to 2023, and what do you know? It's only another new bloody video on the ADHD Army channel. Alright, so true story, I already recorded this bloody video once, but I rambled so much, went on for so long that the flipping thing was like 45 minutes unedited, and I couldn't be asked to edit it. If that's not an ADHD thing, I don't know what is, but I was also aware of the fact that we have quite limited attention spans, and so I've decided to redo it and try and be a little bit snappier, a bit more concise, and a bit more to the point. So the point of this video is, if you are an adult and you suspect that you have ADHD, I'm going to list some things from my life that I now know were signs of ADHD, and if they strike a chord with you, then you might have ADHD too. Maybe it'll confirm a few things. Anyway, I'm at risk of rambling again. Let's get into it. Alright, first part, childhood. And the first thing I just need to say briefly on that subject is that I have also been diagnosed with autism. Autism and ADHD are closely allied disorders of the brain, and it's not at all unusual for there to be some crossover. That is really bloody good coffee. Right, first thing. This is more autism related, but I was a late talker, so much so that I didn't say a word to anyone until, I don't know, about 5 or 6 years old. My mum took me even to the speech therapist because she was concerned that I was, to use the vernacular of the day, retarded. Second thing about my childhood was I was quite bright. I was big on books, spent a lot of time in the library, devoured literature, and that early obsession carried me through a lot more of my life later on. During the early part of my childhood days, if the ADHD was manifesting itself in any way, it was more the kind of the dreamy, daydreaming side of things. Later on though, as the ADHD started kicking into full effect, I started getting into trouble. I began thieving stuff at primary school. I'm not proud of it. I'm just telling you in case it rings a bell with you. I was a colossal risk taker at that time. I used to ride my bike crazily, sort of no hands down hills, doing anything I could as crazy as possible. For instance, we had a 35 or 40 metre beech tree at the bottom of our back garden, and I used to climb all the way to the top of that bloody tree, where the top of it was like, you know, only about this wide, and I would sit at the top on windy days and get blown backwards and forwards in the wind because I just found it thrilling and exciting. That was around about the time I started indulging in a bit of shoplifting too. And I should hasten to add at this point that I didn't nick stuff because we were broke. We were a relatively well-off middle-class family. I did it because now I know now it was for the thrill of it, for the risk of being caught. By the time I got to the end of primary school, when I was about 10, 11 years old, I was such a disruptive presence in my class that the teacher excluded me completely and gave me my own desk round near the classroom bogs of toilets. Had my own desk. I had no part in classes for about half of the year because I was just pissing around constantly, mucking about. All right, that's childhood. Let's move on to the teenage years. So the risk taking was obviously still a huge part of my life, but obviously it escalated. Instead of doing things like riding bicycles, I started riding motorbikes. I didn't much enjoy school. In fact, that's got to be the understatement of the decade. I hated every single thing about it. There was no redeeming qualities to it whatsoever. So obviously I started truanting. I'd skip school, get on the train, go to London, go to the West End and go and muck around in the department stores. Anything other than go to school. I was a teenager in the 1970s in the UK, 1970s/1980s, and there were a lot of sort of houses knocking around that were empty, and I used to go out and vandalise them with my mates. I'm not proud of it. I'm not proud of any of this shit, I'm telling you. Like I said, in case it strikes a chord with someone. The risk started getting bigger. I used to go to the open air car park, the multi-storey car park. I'd go at the 5th floor and I would run around the perimeter wall of that car park in some sort of wanky kind of early parkour or something like that. Obviously I'd have plummeted to my fucking death if I had put a step wrong, but I didn't really care. I used to also hang off the side of that building. On one occasion, I climbed down onto a light fitting on the 5th floor and hung from that. Christ alone knows how I'm not dead. Jesus, coffee's strong. It's making me cheeks all flushed. Anyway, what's next? Oh yeah, joyriding. When I was about 13 years old, my mum bought herself an old Jag for a weekend car. And like I say, we weren't rich, it wasn't a new Jag, but it was a fucking quick one. 5.3 litre V12 XJ12 Jaguar, and I had my own key made for it. And from the age of about 13 and a half, 14, I used to go out and joyride in it. I used to pick people up and go off on drives, and I used to just go out on my own, drive down the motorway as fast as that car went, which, let me tell you, was pretty fucking fast, about 130, 140 miles per hour. Obviously, the thieving was still going on, the pointless thieving, the shoplifting, but also me and a couple of mates, and I was, I must admit, the ringleader. We did over a railway depot, stole a load of things called detonators, which are a warning device that they use on train tracks, and they make a fucking loud noise if you drop a brick on them. And we nicked about 600 of those from a train yard in Hertfordshire in the UK. To cut a long story short, I'm trying to cut all these stories short, such was the quantity of material stolen that they thought the provisional IRA had stolen them, and the anti-terrorism squad of Scotland Yard got tangentially involved in the investigation because they thought that it had been stolen to construct some sort of IED, an improvised bomb of some kind. And we eventually got caught, and I was done, and it's on my record. It's supposed to be expunged when I turned 18, but it wasn't. Even came up when I applied for my Australian passport. Didn't do much schoolwork at all. I honestly never did any homework ever. I never revised for an exam ever. I'd sometimes get the books out and look at them, but I never studied for an exam in my life. I just wasn't capable of doing it. I could not apply myself to it at all. And while I was at school, I was still doing dickhead things. One occasion, I hung out of the 3-storey teaching block by my school scarf, hanging around the latch on the window, swinging backwards and forwards. Pretty much every single one of my school reports from that time said the same thing. Andrew is bright, but he does not apply himself. Could try harder, and all that kind of stuff. I should add as well that whilst I loathed all team sports with a passion, hated them, it turned out I was a pretty good solo athlete. I started swimming a lot. Long story short, started swimming for the county and eventually training at a national level. And because I was a good swimmer, I also became a good distance runner and ended up competing in national triathlons and all that kind of stuff. So despite the fact that I hated sports, I was incredibly fit when I was that age and incredibly competitive. All right, let's wrap up the teenage years by stating that I managed, despite everyone's expectations, to pass all my exams at the age of 16. Nobody had expected me to do that, and I was going to be signed up for the bloody military or some sort of shit like that. But fortunately for everybody, I wasn't. And so it was decided that I would go on and do another couple of years of studying. So I did my advanced level exams, went to a mixed comprehensive school, and basically just chased girls for 2 years and did, if possible, less work than I did for the previous 5. Coffee's going cold, bear with me a sec. I failed all those advanced level exams so badly that I got a U classification, which is unclassified. It's so bad that it doesn't merit any score whatsoever. I decided to retake those exams. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, like one of those flies banging its head against a window. And whether it was just a year of grace or not being at that school and being at a sixth form college, I scraped through and I got 2 of my exams. I got a D and an E, and incredibly, it was enough to get me into college. Alright, so I'm a young adult. I'm about 20 years old now, and I went to college. I went and did a degree that I never even bothered reading the syllabus for. Didn't know a fucking thing about it, and I realised within about a week of being there that it was a terrible idea, and I managed to transition to a geography degree, which was much better spot for me. However, I was really struggling even with that course, and after about a year of doing it, I dropped out. Yes, being a college dropout is a true marker of an ADHD person. If you've been watching all the videos on YouTube, I'm sure you found that out too. I dropped out and I started doing temping work in the city of London. Temping work, it turned out, was absolutely ideal for me because the jobs only lasted a week, 2 weeks at the most in one particular office. So I didn't have enough time to get super bored. You kind of learn what you're supposed to be doing, and by the time you've learned it, you're on to the next gig. So weirdly, it was actually quite a good gig for me. Oh, one thing I forgot to say. When I turned 18, I had a trust fund mature, and I started burning through the money in there. It was quite a little bit of money for the time. I started spending it all on records and fast food and a nice hi-fi and a motorbike. And if I'd kept it, I could have bought myself a house, but I didn't. I started burning through that money because I was shit. Absolutely shit at dealing with money. Anyway, after doing a fair bit of temping in London, I realised I did want to get a degree. This time I was going to do one that I thought I might enjoy, and I got onto an English and journalism course at Middlesex University in London and had a rare old time. I really enjoyed the course, I was engaged in it, and therefore I found it quite easy. I started doing well. I even read the books that I was supposed to read for my course, and consequently I started passing the modules in that degree. That was also when I started working in a pub, and I found the stressful and fast-paced environment of a pub really suited me. I couldn't have seen it coming, but I was bloody good at it. I was a really good barman, and it was in the days before, you know, electronic tills, you know, where you had to do all the sums in your head. It was a stressful environment and I loved it. So I managed to pass my degree. Amazingly, I got a 2-2, which isn't a sensational result, but it's a good solid pass. And I should also add that by that time I had completely burned through my entire trust fund. Alright, young adulthood, done, tick. On to adulthood. I managed to land my dream job even before I graduated, amazingly. Yes, I'm a lucky bastard. I got a job as a magazine journalist working on a computer magazine for a company called Future Publishing based in beautiful Bath in southwest England. This really was just the perfect job for me, and I was fucking good at it. Problem is, when you're good at a job, you get promoted. And I was promoted. I went from staff writer to editor in a year. Unfortunately, that was when the wheels started coming off. When you're a staff writer, you're told what to do. It's an easy gig. Somebody gives you a job to do and you do it. And it's an enjoyable job. You know, you're reviewing a computer game or something like that. So it's easy. But when you become an editor, you've got to be organised. And I was completely disorganised and utterly shit at being an editor, and then I was booted out for being an absolutely lousy editor. So I managed to piss my dream career up the wall. While I was working as a computer journalist, I also got a side hustle as a DJ. Again, I found I was quite good at it. It was a very stressful environment. You know, you're charged with entertaining. The capacity of that club was about 300 people, and you've got to make sure they're having a good night. So it's fairly, you know, difficult job to do well. When I was working at the Future Publishing, I did meet the girl I would go on to marry, my lovely wife, and we had prior to that moved in together. Because I'd lost my full-time job, I started freelancing. However, because I was in charge of doing things like my own taxes, because I was a freelancer, previously I had a pay slip, and all the taxes and national insurance contributions were taken out by my employer, so I didn't have to worry about it. I just got the money I was paid, and that was the end of it. But when I was freelance, I had to do all that stuff, and guess what? I bloody didn't. Eventually, the tax man came calling and said, you haven't put any taxes in. You've been working in this job as a freelancer for a couple of years now, and we haven't seen a red cent from you. So they actually took over my bank account and just started taking money out of it. Thanks, Her Majesty's Tax, Customs and Revenue. And because when you're a freelancer, you're also in charge of getting work in and being organised, I was fucking shit at that too. I was a good writer, but terrible freelancer, terrible at hitting deadlines. I would always bloody miss them, and that's unforgivable in journalism. And so slowly but surely I lost all my contacts and all the goodwill that I built up in my full-time gig, and before you know it, I wasn't earning a penny from writing. So by this time I'm in my mid-30s, I guess, and the wheels have fallen off. I sink into a black depression, and I basically lock myself into a room with a computer and stay there for about 5 years. And incredibly, my wife doesn't leave me during that period. I don't think many people would. I was not an easy person to live with by any stretch of the imagination. I was contributing absolutely fuck all. I wasn't contributing a penny to the finances, and it was pretty tough on her. She was earning all the money, and I was just like in a great fucking hole of depression that I couldn't really find a way out of. And in fact, the only way I managed to dig my way out of the pit that I put myself in was we emigrated to Australia. And that can be the subject of another video, because you've all probably turned off bloody ages ago anyway. So I'm going to stop things there, and we can talk about reinventing yourself and discovering you've got ADHD perhaps in another video. So there we go, guys. That's a potted history of my life, and the red flags that I can now see were part and parcel of somebody with ADHD. Those are all the things. I've looked at all these videos on YouTube, and God only knows I've read a lot of books about ADHD too, and I can see now that some of those events in my life were the red flags. Anyway, I'm blathering on. Hopefully I'll cut this down to some sort of manageable size and not piss everybody off. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, flick us a like and consider subscribing, or send this video to somebody who you think might have ADHD, or if you're trying to illustrate the life saga of someone with ADHD, an illustration of it, maybe this video will prove helpful. Alright, that's it guys. Naff off. See you next time.